we are back after a quite long, checking my audio and my video. Okay. After a very long hiatus. Maybe it wasn't that long. I don't remember. I don't remember how long it's been. I actually had a totally different topic I was going to do today. But I decided to maybe pivot a little bit, and I might throw this topic in at the end. I'm not sure. I don't know if I have enough to really frame it yet, so we'll see. Okay. I'll take questions at the end, or at least after the first 20 minutes. I'm going to I am going to get on a regular schedule again. Maybe Saturdays. I think Saturdays do the best. As far as I always, well, not always, but usually have time on Saturdays. We'll see. I like to go back to 2 streams a week, so we'll see if that flows for the fall, because it did not flow for the summer, that's for sure. Okay. I was watching a documentary on, I don't know if it's I guess it's a documentary on Michael J. Fox today. Actually, right before I was doing this, I haven't even finished it, but I was watching it. He made a comment in that I thought was pretty interesting. And the comment was, and he was talking about the fame he had, when he was back in the 80s and probably early 90s, when he was just the it person in Hollywood. And he said something to the effect that, those realities are built, they're not built of bricks and mortar, they're built of paper. And I thought that was a pretty interesting concept, because to me, when I look at the human realities and what our human consciousness creates, what it strives to create, it's striving to create in the most, I want to use abstract, but I don't know if abstract is really the word to use here. In the most abstract way, it's trying to mimic human fame. It's trying to mimic success. And, you have the ultra versions of that when you get into really famous people like Michael J. Fox was ultra versions of that. But to me, all the human realities are really built on paper, and nothing holds them up. And after a certain period of time, paper starts to wear. It starts to wear, it starts to fade away. And you can't revigorate that piece of paper. It's nothing you can put on it. We try to tape it with Scotch tape, but once it starts tearing apart and once it starts breaking apart, you realize it's all fake, and that's what a lot of us come to in our human realities, where we start getting to where the paper gets torn and we try to tape it back together, and the paper gets mangled and we try to straighten it back out, It's like when you do homework, in the old days, we do homework actually on paper. We get crinkled and you try to straighten it out, so, and you're almost like ironing out the paper to see if you can get it to look okay again, but it never looks the same, right? Once it gets compromised, once it starts to lose any of its integrity, in a sense, it all starts to fade away. And because none of the human realities really have integrity, or it has integrity, human integrity, which is not soul integrity, it's two different. Human integrity is more integrity to ourselves. And to me, soul integrity, it starts with integrity to ourselves, but it transfers to integrity to the whole. We have a connection to the whole that human integrity does not have. Human integrity has integrity for how we feel about ourselves on a human level. What's okay, what's not okay, what we deem is good, what we deem is bad, which we deem is that's okay, but this is not okay. Those are human realities, and those the polarizingness of human realities, where this is okay and this is not okay. And we go through a lot of iterations of that as we look at our human realities and what's okay and what's not okay, and we're still trying to fit it into a box of what people say is okay, but we're still not building it on anything that is, it's almost like paper mache. And when you look at it on the collective level, is where you just keep putting paper on paper on paper. And it gets harder, but it's still just a lot of paper built up on paper. And nothing is really holding it up. Nothing is really, even though I think paper mache, I think we use glue. I think we use glue to kind of make paper mache and glue it together and glue it together. And it has the illusion of looking stronger, but at the end of the day, it's just a little bit of paper all kind of glued and mashed together. And those are the things that we would do, and those are the things that we would constantly do to try to make these realities keep weathering the storm, holding on to them, trying to retool them, maybe even cutting off an edge, making it to be something else. Because we don't want to let any of them go and realize how fake they really are. And because they're not really built on bricks and mortar. They're not built in stone. They're not built on anything, and even soul line realities aren't. And that's kind of the misconception we have, that once we start figuring out how to build a soul line reality, that all of a sudden everything's going to be fine. It's going to be perfect, and these cannot be destroyed. These cannot. You can't bring down bricks and mortar, but we all know you can bring down bricks and mortar. But what starts to happen when you start building your soul line realities, you're building it on a stronger foundation. You're building it on, bricks and mortar, and you're building it up. And even though individual things can collapse while building it, you still have a foundation of your beliefs of what you're building on. And will the sand shift that of what you believe? And how truth is very abstract. It's one of the biggest tropes you hear. Oh, I'm speaking in my truth, or whatever, be your truth, or whatever. It changes. And anyone who says their truth doesn't change hasn't been in enough dimensions to realize it does change. It's not the same. What you think now is not what you're going to think 20 minutes from now or 20 days from now. It's going to be different. Because as your consciousness rises, you look at it differently. You see the reasons it has to go down that way. You understand why certain things have to follow a certain way, or this doesn't happen, and that doesn't happen that way. And if you remove this one thing, this whole reality all of a sudden dissolves, and now we're in a whole different one. Which kind of brings me to my second point, which is history repeating itself. It is the old human adage, like many proofs in the pudding. That history repeats itself, and we see that in a micro way, really, on the micro level. We see it in our life. Wow, we repeat certain things, and the trick is, once you realize you're repeating them, you're starting to pull out of the repeat, right? When you start to realize, holy shit, this is just a repeat. I mean, everyone looks a little different, but it's still the same thing, and I just keep repeating the same thing. We stay in these loop cycles for long amounts of time, and we repeat the same stuff. Now, technically, you can't ever repeat the same thing, because your consciousness is never going to be exactly the same as when you did it the first time. It's our soul's way of getting our human consciousness to work through things, but we do it a much harder way. We do it the hard way. We have to slosh through all these realities. We have to just trudge through them and go through them repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly until we finally get maybe half of the point, and not even the whole point. It's this old. I remember I had a friend that used to tell this joke about going to a doctor, and the doctor was trying to give her a medication, and the doctor was like, it has all these side effects, and they would do a list of side effects, and the one that got her attention was, you might put on weight. And she's like, wait a minute, did you say to put on weight? Forgetting the other 15 in front of that were really even more catastrophic than that one. But that was the one she hold on a second. Sorry about that. I had somebody at the door. That's why I like to do Saturdays. Saturdays seem to be a lot quieter than Fridays are around here. So, all right. I'll probably end up splicing those together. On YouTube anyway. I do not even remember where I was. Okay. We have the illusion that history repeats because we can't pick up on the differences in our consciousness while we go through the reality. As a human, we slog through them, and we don't even see there's a repeat. I always say, when you get to the point where you're repeating, it is a big moment in our consciousness, a big moment in our ascension, when we can start to see things. Even if I would even probably put repeating realities and noticing that, even in awakening, sometimes we see it. But the more subtle repeats, we probably don't see till we get farther into our ascension process, because we can start to understand that, oh yeah, I am repeating. This is the same reality over and over and over again. What's going on? And then there's a part of where you can see it but don't do anything about it. No, I know I'm repeating, but I don't really want to fix anything, because the minute I fix something, then stuff's going to change, and I don't really want anything to change. So even though I'm repeating, I don't want to do the things to either end the reality, do a hard reset on the reality, which is basically ending it. Sometimes you can keep some of the people, sometimes we can't. Um, do I close it out? Do I try to shift it? Do I just not want to go through this anymore? Why do I keep attracting the same things? And that's probably one of the biggest questions you'll get. You'll get into just asking on your own, why do I keep getting the same stuff? It's because we haven't shifted enough. We haven't raised our vibration high enough to pull out of it. We're still running the same programming. We're still going through the same type of stuff internally. And these programs run through. They run through. Realities bleed over, dimensions bleed over, different versions of ourself bleed over. All these kind of things start to bleed over, and we start to see that we're not playing this out just in our personal life. I'm not playing this out just in my work life. I'm playing this out in all of my existences. I'm playing this out everywhere, not just in one place. I'm doing this all over the place. And when we start to really see that, that's when we can kind of make the biggest changes. But even when we look at it on the macro level, the collectives repeat. Certain points in history, which is kind of one thing I want to touch on a little bit today, and I might explore it later in a video. There are certain moments in timelines. I don't want to call it history, because all these timelines are still consecutively going on. It's always funny when you'll see videos on different mysteries, whether it be Roanoke Colony or Abraham Lincoln's Abraham, the whole story about Abraham Lincoln, or it doesn't matter, John Kennedy. It doesn't matter what the mysteries were. They'll always say, "Oh, new information is unlocked." We got new information now, and it's like, do you really have new information, or just the reality starting to bleed over, and that reality is concurrently going on, and something's bleeding through? It's kind of like in our world, if you wake up one morning and your wrist really hurts, and you might wake up a couple mornings and your wrist is really sore, and then maybe three months later you break your wrist, and it was almost like that reality was bleeding through. It's kind of showing you, this could be happening. And it's also on a different consciousness level. You could look at it as, I have something to clear here, and it might, maybe I can clear it on my own, or the bone might have to break for me to clear it, to really clear what's stuck in my arm right there, because everything is stuck in our body. Injuries tell us something, different things happen, they tell us something. But there are certain things that do repeat, and because a lot of all these realities are still going on concurrently somewhere in the multidimensional space, and everyone is an aspect of us, and all historical figures are technically an aspect of us too. There'll be some you're going to be more inclined to than others, but everyone is an aspect of us. And when we look at it, it doesn't have to be in our immediate world. I used to play this game, and I read about it in a book, and I can't remember the book's name. It was one of the Penny Pierce books, which was a big on intuition, at the time. And it was a game that she would get people in her workshops to play, where you put a name in an envelope and give someone the envelope and see what impressions they get off the envelope. I think in my early days on Twitch, I actually did that. I did that kind of game on here. And usually when I would do it, I put historical figures in there. Or I do everything from historical figures to Baby Yoda. I just have a whole array of different people in there. And people would pick different ones. And one of the kind of fun parts of the game was to figure out, well, why did I pick that person? It didn't really matter so much to me what you got off the envelope, though I thought that was interesting a lot. It was more of, I wonder why I picked this person. Out of all these envelopes, why did I pick these people? Why am I interested in these people? For reasons we might view in our human consciousness as either positive or negative. Why am I attracted to certain figures in history? And what our human would look at as history. Because it's not happening. Anything that's not happening right now, we look at as history. We look at it as history, or we look at it as the future. Our human's going to try to categorize it either way. But a lot of these things repeat, and all of a sudden, we got new information. We're going to do this whole new thing about it. All this new stuff is coming up. All this new stuff is coming out. You see the same thing in different scientific discoveries. All of a sudden, no, look what we can do now. Because all these realities, they do start to bleed over. And you can start to see that when different people are removed from timelines, the whole timeline starts to reset. Because if you even want to call it a lot of if you look into the comic book realm, which is, to me, you get into your kind of your superhero powers when you're really going into your comic book, with the comic book phases, when you go into Ascension, you're really into, developing your own superpowers and reading your field and showing all the stuff by creating realities. And whereas our powers are more internal and the superhero powers are a little more external, the way they're depicted, but majority of the time, and you start to kind of get into this, this whole superhero thing, and get into these superhero phases where you're really kind of drawn to that type of content because you're getting your own power and you're standing in your own power and seeing how powerful you are. You're having your own hero origin story, um, about, how the things you're gonna have to kind of let go of to go on your journey. And it's a very similar thing. It's just the hero's journey in general. But a lot of these things do start to bleed over. A lot of these things start to kind of go in one direction or the other. And you see when different people are taken on a different timelines, how the timelines shift. And I forgot where I was going for a moment. Now I remember. In a lot of the comics, they'll call them Nexus. I think it was Nexus beings or some people that were the same in every reality. And another comic book, they would call it an anchor being. I think that's what Deadpool and Wolverine called them. I don't know if that's even a term that was ever in any of the comic books, but an anchor being that kind of ties that whole collective. There's a whole collective tied to that person. Maybe that's a different way to put it. Whole collective tied to that person. When that person is removed, the whole timeline shifts. Everyone shifts. Now, when these timelines happen and these things shift, people are removed from their realities. If we go through, I'm going to do American history for a minute. If we remove Abraham Lincoln, that whole timeline now is shifted, right? Everything that was going to happen in that timeline when he was in it is now shifted. And now you're in a different timeline where he's not in anymore, and now everything is shifted. Brings up a lot of anger, brings up a lot of upset people. Some people, you could argue, not even argue, but on one side you can look at it and say, okay, people are clearing emotions, so everyone's shifting up into a different reality where they're going to have to stand in their power more. They're going to have to say, this is not okay, we're going to do this, now we're going to do this. What now happens after that? So I think if you call them like a person that's really attached to leading a collective, maybe that's even a better way to say it. And as people get removed and the collective seems to go haywire in a sense because the person that was anchoring that collective is gone and everyone's trying to figure out now where they fit. And the timelines shift, and when we are in our own reality, there are certain things, and you can look at it on that level with a lot of the collectives. And remember, I'm talking about it more in like past and future, but I want everyone to kind of, it's a way to frame it for our human consciousness, but it's all concurrent. There is no past and future. And the way you're going to remember something in one timeline is not how someone's going to remember something in a different timeline. That's why you get so many different controversial stories about everything that's ever happened. You can have two people in the same situation. Everyone has a different account of this is what happened or that is what happened. Because everyone's in a different dimension technically when they're in it, or even if you're in the same dimension, you're in a different part of your consciousness is not going to be exactly the same. Your timelines are not exactly the same. So people remember things in a different way. They don't remember stuff exactly the same way. And we see this time and time and time and time and again. And we see it in our own world. We see it in the collectives all the time. So if we even look at our own realities and look for what is that anchor thing, to us it's probably not going to be a person. It could be a person that they get removed from the realities. Does our reality collapse? Well, technically, can that happen? Because it's our reality. No one's going to collapse our reality for us. Are they a strong aspect of us that once they get removed, now the whole reality that seemed like it revolved around them can't anymore? Because now especially if we give our power away to a certain aspect of ourselves. And you see a lot of collectives doing that all over the place. And that goes on everywhere, on every level. When you get into cliques in high school, you get into all this different stuff of friend groups we'll have as we go through our awakening, our ascension, our human realities. There's always going to be an aspect of us that someone shows us that we are drawn to. Like, for whatever reason, we're drawn to that person. We're drawn to whatever it is that they're doing. But it's because it's a part of us that we haven't tapped into yet. And on a grander scheme, you see these people anchoring in these bigger collective realities. And in the movie, in the Deadpool and Wolverine movie, when that person got removed, eventually the whole reality went unravel. And I feel like it's very similar in our life. And if you look at it on the collectives, everything starts to unravel when certain people are removed from certain timelines. And that's why you have so many parallel realities, so many parallel offshoots where people were removed, and then how did that reality turn out? How did that timeline turn out? You have so many books written on all these alternative timelines, and people say, "Well, I'm just making them up." They're not making them up, and you even have some people that will acknowledge it. No, I didn't make that up. I saw that. I clearly saw that, or I dreamed that. I feel like I was in that where that didn't happen, and then this person, this person won the war, or this person didn't, wasn't removed from the realities, and they stayed in the reality. This is how different it was. Um, Now, all these things are agreed upon ahead of time. All these people are removed because that's their time to exit that reality, exit that timeline. But there's spin-offs where they don't exit the timelines, and things are completely different. And when we start really looking at people in our reality that might anchor in our timelines, people that we feel like the whole reality revolves around them. And I will tell you, when you're in your own reality like that, when you have a reality that you feel revolves around somebody else, that person will immediately, I'm going to say immediately, eventually get removed from your reality, because we can't revolve around anybody else. Even though technically they are an aspect of us. So technically we're revolving around ourselves, but we give so much power to that aspect through another person that they have to go, whether they leave through, transcending in general, or they just leave the reality for us and they go on and do something else. And we feel like the whole thing starts to collapse because they were what held it together for us. And it's not so much to me they were what held it together for us, they're what kept us there. And the minute they're not there anymore, you find you probably lose a lot of interest in the reality. I don't want to be in this reality anymore because I don't have the interest in it anymore. Now I feel like I don't have that anchor person to keep me in it. And because our frequency is so many different ways we can break it down. Our frequency is too different now from that aspect of us. It's a reality that's going nowhere, especially if we're butting heads in a way with a person in that reality, yet we're still in it because we have that strong energetic connection to them, but the whole reality is still sideways, which will happen quite a bit for us, where you'll feel that strong connection and you want to be with that person because you love the energy of that person. But the consciousness of that person keeps the reality so sideways and so backwards, it has to pull apart, just like a piece of paper pulling apart. It can't stay together anymore. It's not able to stay together anymore. It has to go. It has to move forward into something else. It can't stay the way it is. And we go through so many different iterations of that. And so many different, you see it play out in so many different events. You see it play out in the collectives. And I always say, if you want a clearer perspective on something internally, what collectives are you doing? What is interesting you in the collectives? If you go out there and look at a collective, what is it that interests you? What is there a person that interests you? And you kind of get pulled into that collective. What is this person doing? And why do I feel like I'm really drawn to, everything they say, everything they do? I really want to know what's going on with them. Yes, they're mirroring back a part of us. Yes, there is that, depending on how much you get into those collectives, there can be an excitement in a lot of the human realities, because they're so externally focused. They keep us so distracted that sometimes we try to escape to those realities and escape to those collectives because it keeps us away from where we're really supposed to be doing. And yes, they act as activations. Yes, they're showing us something else. So that's when that's why it's really not appropriate for us to judge what other people are doing, what interests somebody else. You see so many people interested in art, or they're interested in history, and there's something about history that they really are drawn to for whatever reason. It's like when you get a reading, and we talked about this numerous times. We call it a past life. It's not. It's a concurrent life going on, but there's something energetically similar here that's pulling in that for you. It wouldn't be pulling into your energy field. You wouldn't be curious about it. You wouldn't even want to do that. You wouldn't even get your own flashes or your own, people call them downloads, of another existence that you've been in, if it wasn't important to now. It's now that's important. It's not that other place, that other space, that other dimension, that other timeline, that other reality. It's how it attaches to the now. So when we look at, what people are into, whether it's they're into history, they're into art, they're into certain parts of history, there's something that's drawing them there. That's why we want to be very conscious of when we look at what someone else is into and say, why would you be into that? That's a waste of time. Now, on one hand, it could be a distraction, and a lot of the things in the human world are a distraction. On the other hand, it is an activation for them of some sort. And as we go through different iterations, and the more timelines you go through, you're going to notice that what used to really pull you in to a timeline, all of a sudden it won't pull you in anymore. It's like when we parallel that with parallel realities, or what someone would deem as a different dimension for them, a different time. It might be a better way, even though I don't really want to use time there, but a different sense, a different time. When you start pulling yourself into or looking into all these different multidimensional worlds, in a sense, or multidimensional realities, you kind of can see why you used to be really drawn to that, now you're not anymore, because the energetic signature that drew you to that has now been transcended, or it's been unlocked, and all the information you needed to get from that, the insight you needed to get from that of what's going on with you concurrently now. I don't ever want anyone to get lost in that whole thing. You can get lost in stuff for a while, you can be seeking into anything for a while, but you don't want to get lost in it to where you think that's all it's about, when it's always going to be about us. We always have to be able to bring it back to what we're doing. Why is this important to me right now? Why am I wondering about all this stuff? Why have I had so many historical things coming up that I've been looking at lately? I mean, what is it about these certain things that I want to look at? Can you go back and look at all these parallel realities and all these different events starting to bleed over, and look how the collectives start to repeat and repeat and repeat, but they always repeat a little different. It's like when we repeat things, it repeats a little different. We're not the same. So it's never going to be exactly the same. It's going to be, it could be a very close remake to the original. What do they call an adaptation from a book to a movie? It's very similar, but it's a little different. But as a human, we don't pick up on the little different. But it's even opposite to us in our human reality, because in our human reality, we don't even pick up as it's an adaptation to the same shit we already did. We think it's all different. So it's kind of funny, because in our human existence, we don't even have the consciousness to look and see that it's almost the same thing, which is a few little things tweaked out. We're gonna redo the scenery a little bit. We might have a different person come in. We might walk the same person back in again, but we will swear to God it's different. And that's how our human consciousness works. It can't pick up on even the subtleties to know that we are stuck in the same thing again. And the collectives will get in that same type of thing, where they're always kind of in the same thing. They get obsessed with the same stuff. They get obsessed with a person. You've seen that throughout. But like I said, in our life, we do the same. It is mimicking us, because it's our internal focusing outward. So whatever we do, as the collectives all get together, they're all going to do the same thing we do. We just do it on a scale that's in our own little bubble, our own reality that we're creating. That we will maybe give someone else in our life way too much power over what we feel, what we think, what we do. And we all do that, and then on the collectives, you'll see large groups of people giving too many people power over what they say, what they do. And that's really human realities in general. When you're in your human consciousness and the realities that creates from that consciousness, you're always giving your power away to somebody else, whether it's just the collectives as a whole for acceptance to kind of be in there. Because if you don't follow all the rules of human behavior, you get kicked out very quickly. You can't stay in here. You can't, be in that. You can't stay in that. Because you will be removed. You will be pulled away from a lot of that stuff. And the COVID realities pulled a lot of people away, but some people stayed away, other people went back into the realities. No one went back into exactly the same. And I keep seeing so many people say, not just even about the COVID realities, but just in general about their life. They go through this big shift. Something's happened maybe over the past year, over the past 2 months or whatever. They've lost a job. Now they got a new job, or, they're in a different relationship. And I'll hear the adage, and I think we all used to say it. I know I've said it before. I just am gonna be glad to things to get back to normal. Because to me, our human consciousness was normal. Our soul consciousness is natural, and it's a totally different state. And it feels natural, but it does not feel normal. That's why we feel so out of sorts for so long while we're making that transition, because it doesn't feel like what we would normally be. We're not the same person we would normally be. We don't do the same stuff we would normally do. We just don't. This is my natural state, not my normal. My normal state was different. That's why when we first start moving through awakening and ascension, and we start trying to figure out what's soul aligned, how do I know? Do the opposite of what you would have done. And that's a good first step. If you used to talk, shut up. If you never used to speak up, then it's time to say something. If you were a busybody, stop being a busybody. Stop worrying about what is going on in someone else's reality that didn't ask you. We have to kind of go the opposite direction for a long time, because it does feel different. It feels different when we start going through these transitions where we feel like everything's different. We don't feel like everything's the same. And we can see that it's not the same. We can see that we're going through a different iteration. Even though in our human consciousness, we're waiting for something to be the same again. But it never is the same again. And it just can't get back there. And we don't really understand that. Even though for a while, we have that, like, it's not, it is the same, but it's not the same. I feel like this can feel contradictory, where it's like we repeat the same thing, and then we don't want to notice it's the same thing. But no, wait, we can't really repeat the same thing, but then we want it to get back to normal where it is the same thing. It's this very circular logic that we'll go through as humans, and that's why it could take so long to kind of shred all that down. Even if it's paper we're shredding, it does get the stronger paper mache we're trying to shred. And because it's all just like weeds, it's so entangled, and it's so in there that when we start pulling things apart, it's like, wow, this is a lot tougher than I thought. Where if I had one single piece of paper, I can rip that. And let's think of one reality is that one piece of paper, and that shit just burns and goes away immediately when one thing shifts. But when you have all these realities piled up on all our human consciousness beliefs, and what our human consciousness believes, and what the collectives of the human consciousness believe, and now we have all this glue and this paper mache, and now we have all these pieces of paper lapped together, and now we're trying to pull all these apart, and takes a lot longer to do. Not so much because it should take longer, because it's so much ingrained in our human consciousness, we just don't want to pull at it too hard. We don't want to pull at it too hard because we don't want everything to pull apart. We're trying our best to hold it all together, and almost hold it all together, put it under our arm, and take it with us. We don't really want to destroy it. No one gets into ascension and awakening to destroy our human realities. That was never why anyone got into it. We all got into it to enhance things we had, not to destroy them. So it's kind of the bait and switch when we realize, well, I can't keep them anymore because they're so distorted. I can't keep them, so now I'm going to have to, I guess, just leave them. And I thought I'd be able to just pack it up in a little fanny pack and bring it with me, but I can't anymore. These things they're too large to do. They're too large to bring. So as we, go through a lot of these iterations on, is this the same? And why does it might appear normal for a while, but we get back to the point, it's like, what was normal to us, it doesn't feel normal anymore, right? So even if we go back into, now I'm back into more of what feels the same, I lost my job, now I got another job, and now I can look at that and go, okay, it feels, now it's going to go back to what it was, but it never can. And relationships never can be what they were in one stage or the other stage, because they're not supposed to be. None of this stuff is supposed to stay still. And even though we can be very still inside, our realities can't stay still. They're not supposed to stay still. The whole field is breathing and moving, and even though to us it looks like nothing's moving and nothing's changing, it can't stay the way it was. No matter what little thing you change, whether you remove something that was very important to anchoring in that reality for you from it, whether it be that job, and now that job is gone, let me plug in another one, and now it's going to be normal again, it's going to feel the same. It can't feel the same. It's just not, it can't get back to that because you're in a different timeline. You're in a different frequency of you know, you can look at it as it's an offshoot, a different frequency of that timeline. So maybe it's a parallel timeline, but it's not the same. No matter how much we kind of want it to be, we want it to feel the same, or we want it to be normal again, and it does not feel normal again. So I think that has covered what I wanted to cover. Let me see if I have any questions. No, I do not. I think there's anything else I want to bring in. I know as we go through, I've seen a lot of people talking about stuff that's been happening to them the last couple of weeks, whether it be, you know, things going on within their family, things going on where they really feel pulled to do one thing, pulled to the other, or that they feel drawn to something. Probably a better word than pulled to something. They feel drawn to do something. They feel drawn to do something else. 2025 templates are always coming in. To me, as soon as we get through the Lion's Gate, I start to feel. And sometimes you can even feel it ahead of time, that what you're going to be focusing on, what your journey is going to be next year. You know, when you and I have the concrete stuff, you might not even hit the ground running with boots on, actually doing it, anchoring it in, and doing the things you saw till next April, you know, March or April. That's usually how it would work for me. I'd feel it and maybe do a little bit of work on it, but it wouldn't really anchor in where it was actually a reality until, you know, months and months later into that year. But you can kind of see how the cadence is going. You can kind of see what you're supposed to be doing. You can kind of see what all of a sudden doesn't work so much anymore, and what needs to shift for us all to go on to the next thing. You might feel like, okay, things are repeating again. But I promise you, if you look close at something repeating, you're going to see it's not quite the same. Once you're at the consciousness to see it's repeating, you can see how it's not exactly the same, but there is a similar signature from the last one. You know, you're working through a program, you're just doing it the longer way. And in our human consciousness, we had to do it the longer way because we didn't know another way. We didn't know there was an energetic way to go through it. Energetic way to see I have a problem here. You know, I feel like I have an issue here. I have to work through this. I'm going to work through this and see, why do I have a fear here? You know, why do I not want to do this? Why do I want to do this? We have so many different ways we can look at stuff, so many different ways we can go through stuff. And there are these times when we kind of just, in our human consciousness, we don't see a different way. You know, we keep getting faced with reality after reality because you don't want to have to connect in and really see what's going on. And in the fourth dimension, that's when people start to connect in and kind of see, hey, what's going on? Energetically, what's going on? You know, that's when you get interested in that stuff, when you can't quite figure it out. The human consciousness can't figure out what's going on because it's not supposed to. You know, it doesn't have the footing to. It doesn't have the vision to, in a sense. You know, it's very me focused, and you always know when you're in your human consciousness when it's very me focused. And sometimes it can extrapolate out to everyone I care about, but if you really dive down into it, it's still you focused because these people affect me. And these people, you know, make me happier. These people, whatever story you have around these people, it's still me focused. It's still about me, though I'm going to make it sound like it's about everybody else. Even though it's not. It's still about me. You know, human realities begin and end with, it's about me. And if we try to convince ourselves otherwise, we are doing ourselves a disservice. And everyone else around us, to make us really feel like we're more magnanimous than we really are. Okay. I think we're going to end that today. And I will see everyone at some point next week. I'm not sure when. Not sure when, but at some point. All right. Bye.